This question is for anybody whose adult children are living at home with them. This person asked me, do you feel pressure from other family members or society in general to not allow or let your 20-something children live at home? They went on to say that they have two sons, 24 and 22, that live at home and work full-time and pay rent, etc. I talked about this quite a bit before the election. I realize I've gotten a lot more followers on TikTok and YouTube since then, so I think it bears repeating, maybe even more of a full explanation. So my kids are 14, 17, 20, and 22. They all still technically live at home, although one of my kids is transferring and going to be completing her college degree in another city, and so she will be moving away from home in September. My 22-year-old currently doesn't live at home because they are also studying elsewhere, but she will be returning to home for the fall to continue finishing her bachelor's. I've discussed this at length on my YouTube channel because I think one of the things that we really struggle with in American society is that we lack a village, but we also lack this concept of intergenerational living. We have toxic individualism that is so highly prioritized in American society. And this 18, you're up and out when you're 18. A lot of my early really big videos on TikTok were where I was asking other Gen X, elder millennial folks, did your parents kick you out when you were 18? And you can go back and find those videos on my TikTok. They're pretty horrifying. Not only were a lot of folks kicked out at 18, but 14, 15, 16. It was the 70s, it was the 80s. There wasn't a lot of protection for adolescents back then. And so many people just got kicked to the curb by their parents, independent of whether or not they were ready to actually be living on their own or even had a place to go. I think that idea is still really pervasive in the culture now, although as America becomes increasingly less white, I mentioned in a video the other day that Generation Alpha is the first US generation that is not majority white. Boomers were 71% white. Gen Alpha is 48% white. I think because of that, because other cultures don't have the same expectations of what happens when you turn 18, other cultures don't have this same toxic individualism. We see them bring their more family-centered ideals to the United States, and we see more young folks who are living at home after they turn 18 without any judgment from their family members, with the freedom from their parents to say, you're welcome to stay here. This is your home. This is our home, but it's also your home, which is so different than I think for a lot of especially white people who are older millennial Gen X. We were told from our parents that was their home. That was their home. That wasn't our home. When you were 18, it was time to either go to college, join the military, or go get your own place. There was such a common sentiment. One of those three, pick one of those three. Some folks only had two of them available to them, military or get out. You're seen as a burden to your parents. I also had a tremendous number of people in a horrifying amount of people in my comments who, when they turned 18, their parents gave them a bill, said, this is how much you owe us for your childhood. And that to me is just it's so appalling to think about all of the kids in this country, now adults, who were raised to believe that they were a burden to their parents, that they were indebted to their parents. They didn't choose to be born into that family. Parents have an obligation to love and care for and provide for their kids. I cannot conceive of treating my children that way, even though it was very much held over my head when I was a child, how much money I was costing my parents. Here's all the things you owe us for. Parents didn't present me with a bill when I turned 18 or when I graduated from college, though, thank goodness. My kids know this is their home. They are welcome to live here as long as they want. As long as they need to, this is their home as well as mine. If they move out and need to come back at some point in their life, they are more than welcome. This is a safe place for them. This is a safe harbor in the storm. If they could have been out on their own for years and years and they go through a divorce or they lose their job or they have illness, whatever it is, they have some crisis in their life, or they're just in a place where they need more familial support, they can always come back home. No judgment. I don't see anything wrong with that. I think the toxic individualism in American society that perpetuates this notion of you have to get out of your parents' house. Your parents need to go live their lives now, as if they weren't already living their lives by having a relationship with their children. But capitalism is also yes, we need to divide households. Yes, you could stay at home with your parents where they've already paid off their mortgage or they're capable of paying their rent. You could save money while you go to school, or you could even work full-time from home like this person's adult children and save, because rent is astronomical right now. No. Capitalism wants you to go set up a separate household for no reason. 18, move out on your own. You no longer have your support network. You now have to pay rent. So your parents are paying rent or mortgage. You're now paying rent somewhere. You have all of these additional utilities. You incur so many more expenses when you could have pooled resources with your parents. Like maybe you were working and you could have contributed toward the rent and the utilities, but that's far less expensive than going out on your own. And what we see when kids are given the choice is that a lot of times when they turn 18, they would rather stay home, focus on their education. For me, my kids have chosen to stay here because that is what works for them with their education, getting their support needs met. If they had to go live somewhere else in town and pay rent, they would have to get a full-time job instead of part-time jobs in order to make rent. And then they would not be focusing as hard on their studies and maybe their grade point would slip. Well, why not? I'm already here. I'm already cooking dinner for me. You go ahead and study for your exam and I'll, make sure that there's enough for all of us to eat. I do expect my adult children to help contribute to the chores, right? This is their home as well as my home. So I expect them to participate in the care of the home. And they often will volunteer to help cook or they'll volunteer to do other things that are above and beyond. I don't know. I appreciate, for many, many reasons, the fact that America is becoming less white, but I really appreciate that people are coming here with their own, perspective on how to raise kids and their own perspective on what intergenerational living looks like and how we can support each other through that. And how there's nothing wrong with grandparents and parents and kids all living together. There's nothing wrong with adult parents and adult children still living together. There's nothing wrong with people pooling their resources and providing each other with more support. Like that, I don't maybe that's my permaculture perspective, but I don't understand why that has been so vilified in this society, except for toxic individualism and the ways that it benefits capitalism and causes you to use up more resources. To answer your question, yeah, I've gotten shit from friends and relatives both about my adult children still living at home, off and on, right? My 22-year-old, she has not lived with us in the summer. She's gone and done her own thing. She goes to school here, so she comes back home and goes to school during the school year rather than paying rent somewhere else and spending money. Instead, she's able to save money. But the amount of copium, I think, from friends and relatives who've been like, well, you only want your kids to stay home because you're controlling them. You don't want them to grow up. You don't want them to spread their wings. No, I would have believe me, zero problem if my very small house had fewer people in it. And that would be, I would love to go see my kids set up their own households, be able to afford their own house. They're just not at that phase of life yet. I love having my children here with me. I love having a relationship with them. I enjoy their company. But like any relationship, it comes with pluses and minuses. It comes with stresses and, good things as well. One of the things I keep telling my younger kids, my teenage sons, while their eldest sister is off having a wonderful adventure this summer, it's like, I love seeing her go get to have independent experiences, like go do her own thing. That is something that every parent should want for their kids, is for them to be adults who have their own unique lived experience, get to run their own lives. But that doesn't mean that the best way to accomplish that is by kicking somebody out when they're 18, whether or not they're ready. And actually, I think, again, maybe this is my own toxic individualism playing into it. Adults can have their own lives and run those lives and be very independent and still house share with their own family members, with their parents or their grandparents or their cousins or aunts and uncles or their siblings. That doesn't mean that you're not a fully formed adult and independent. I would love to see American society. I understand a lot of people in American society right now have to do this, have to have intergenerational living because the cost of housing is so extremely high in this country. And that sucks. That's not a good thing. But one of the good things to come out of that is that people are embracing intergenerational living more. People are saying, oh yeah, maybe immigrants in our country have a better idea about how to have family and how to have relationships where you support each other. Maybe what is the status quo in the US is not necessarily good for us or our kids or, good for us financially either. I hope that answers your question. Yes, I've gotten friends and family who are kind of all up in our business and meddling and passing judgment without understanding all of the circumstances or don't even want to understand the circumstance. I don't give a shit. Just say, okay, thanks. That's your opinion. Okay. It's not going to make a difference on how we're living our lives. So if you need to think that about us, okay. My priority is making sure my kids have their needs met and they are able to pursue the paths they want to pursue. And if that means right now that they're staying at home and we get to enjoy each other's company a little bit more, okay, that's fine. If they need to come back later in their lives, that's fine too. If they're ready to move out, great, that's fine. I'm going to support them in that. Right, like neither my children nor myself need to take those other people's opinions into consideration at all when we decide our living situation.